So next, I would like to introduce Dr. Theoni Soublis, who is a professor of education at the University of Tampa, teaching graduate courses in public school law and social justice education for over 20 years. She's dedicated to the preservation of true public education. She's a former Riverview High School teacher. She was educated in Sarasota Public Schools and is educating her daughter in Sarasota County Schools. And I started Sarasota County Schools in 3rd grade. So Alta Vista, Southside, Brookside, Sarasota High. So it's a pleasure to have you here today. And she's going to cover a range of current issues, including PragerU videos and other chaos that's going on.
Thanks, John, for that very nice introduction. I am Theoni Soublis. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Can you hear me through this mic? I tend to project anyway, so are we okay with hearing? Okay, wonderful. I first want to start off by thanking the League of Women Voters for creating this forum so that we can continue to inform the public about the important concepts, content, and laws that are occurring in publication in our county. So thank you very much, League. And it's a pleasure to be with all of you. And thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us. Sean was gracious enough to give you a little bit of my background, and Jill was talking about the teaching profession. And that's what I do. I train teachers at the University of Tampa for over 20 years. If you're majoring in education and you know at a very young age that that's what you want to study at the university level, and I'm very happy to report that we still have students majoring in education who want to be teachers. And we missed the first week of classes because of the hurricane. So the first week of classes were already canceled. So I got to meet with my seniors for the first time last week, and they are wide-eyed and excited. And that is the power of young teachers, because they are still very idealistic and they are very passionate, and they came out of the classroom and they want to make a difference. These teachers want to go back into the classroom and give back what their teachers gave to them. So that community has not disappeared. We still very much have people who want to be teachers. So the more of us in our community who can support those teachers and work against these laws that are keeping people out of the profession for a long period of time. See, that's where it changes. They get into the classroom for 3 to 5 years, and then they realize the weight and the pressure of the politics, and that's what drives them out. So how do we keep them in the classroom? It's through forums like this, it's through education, and it's through voting, League of Women Voters. It's through voting. It's becoming highly aware of what the issues are and making sure that we get those issues out so that we are voting for representatives, legislators, senators, and of course governors in our state who will be supportive of this profession. So I was asked to talk about 3 different topics today concerning current events in education. The first one is about the critical learning test. You may have read some headlines about the critical learning test. It's a new exam that the state has accepted as a college entrance exam in lieu of the SAT or the ACT. The second topic that I'll be talking about is an update on vouchers. Since the universal voucher system has been passed earlier this year, I would like to give you an update about what's going on with vouchers. And the last one is the curriculum that was recently approved as a supplementary curriculum in the state for teachers to use, and that's PragerU material. So those are the 3 concepts that I'm going to talk about. Those 3 concepts all have a common theme. They're all big money. Every single one of these concepts has a money train that you can follow, where people continue, big corporations and private industry, continue to make money off the backs of our children, using your tax dollars as the incentive to get there. So that's very concerning to me on multiple levels. As a mother, as an educator, as an activist, I'm concerned. So the first 2 I'm just going to kind of talk about in very general terms, and then my main topic today is going to be the PragerU curriculum. So I just wanted to bring your attention and start kind of paying attention in the news, on the radio, in the media about the the classical learning test, CTL. This is a private organization who's developing a standardized exam that is mirrored. If anyone is familiar with the charter school in town, the Classical Academy, it's mirroring towards that Classical Academy charter, where it's the classical canon that's being taught with a very Christian conservative foundation in the curriculum. So that is the curriculum at Classical Academy, and if parents are choosing to send their children there, fine. But this is going to be the way that they're going to get those kids into college. The problem, I have many, many problems with standardized tests, but that's not what I'm here to talk about today. The problem with using this particular standardized test is that there's very limited data, that there is reliable information that this exam is measuring college readiness. We have decades and decades of data with the SAT and the ACT, regardless of how you feel about those entrance exams. There is libraries of data to justify that the results of this data speak toward college readiness and whether or not a student is prepared for a 2-year college or a 4-year college or a vocational school. That is the idea behind these standardized tests. 1.2 to 1.5 million students across the country will sit for either the SAT or ACT every single year. So you imagine the mountains of data that are available to support the idea of college readiness. This is a very new company, the CTL company. Only just over 100,000 students have taken this exam. So the data is not there. It is not a rich pool of information to say that this exam is proving that this student is ready for college. So it's saying you can take it in lieu of, take the classical learning test instead of the SAT. It's comparing two very different data sets. So I just want to bring your awareness to that, more so that it's a business. And so when we have our state government saying we are going to promote your business, that's a huge concern to me, and that I wanted to bring attention to you today. I have some more information about classical learning test. If you'd like it, we can continue that conversation, but I'm going to move on because I have a few other topics I'd like to talk about today. The second one is the update on the voucher system. The universal voucher was passed earlier this year, much to the, we worked very hard at informing the public that we do not want this universal voucher passed, because the universal part, just to be clear, to make sure you understand, is that it removed the income cap from families. That's what makes it universal. There was a time prior to the new law going into effect that the voucher system was created for low-income families to use money towards a private education. Now that cap was lifted and anybody in the state can apply for the voucher. So that's the data that I wanted to go and find. So for years that the voucher system has been in place in our state, about 100,000 families take advantage of it. There's about 100,000 families across the state that use the voucher system. As soon as the law passed earlier this year, a 44% increase in approved applications. So it went from 100,000 families to over 380,000 families taking public money directly out of the school and into the private sector. What does 380,000 families translate to in dollar signs? $4 billion in 1 year alone. $4 billion are being siphoned out of the public education fund in our state and going directly to the private sector. We knew this. We had League of Women Voters had another open public forum where we invited a guest speaker, Noreen, I can't think of her last name, but she was from the Florida Policy Institute. And she spoke in a very educated way. And she knew a year ago that it was going to cost $4 billion. I don't know if anybody believed her, because here we are. It was passed, and that's exactly the prediction that the Florida Policy Institute came out with their data and their research were on point. What we don't know yet is the demographic. That's the data I'm really interested in, but it hasn't been reported yet, but I will report it back to you if you're interested. What is the demographic of those new 200,000 families? What is the income of those 200,000 families? I'm very curious about that, because I'm sure it's more than $130,000 a year, which is what it used to be. So I'm very curious about the demographic of the new families who are taking advantage of public money being put into the private sector. You've probably been reading about what some of this money can be spent on other than tuition if you've been reading the headlines. I printed out 2 pages of a 13-page document. I'm not big on reading to people, so I'm not going to read to you. This is a very easy, accessible piece of information that you can get offline. But, you know, if you're going to get a high school degree in the state, you have to take your content area classes, but you also have to take your electives. You have to take PE and music and theater and art. Well, theater falls under art. But the athletic equipment that can be purchased with these voucher dollars, I found surprising, because we don't see this athletic equipment in public schools. The list explicitly says surfboards, which I like because I like to surf, but I certainly didn't use public money to buy my surfboard. You can buy a kayak, you can buy a paddleboard, a basketball hoop, ping pong tables, pool tables. Have you ever seen a pool table in public school? I've never seen a pool table in a public school. Now, I'm not saying that I would not like to have all of these things accessible to our PE teachers and students taking PE in our schools, but we're certainly never going to get there if we keep taking $4 billion a year out of our budget. But the private sector can give those types of materials to their students. Here's another one that was really shocking to me when I read the list, and it's about equipment. The money can be spent on curriculum. So curriculum is broadly defined. When I define curriculum, I'm thinking textbooks, things to read, websites, articles. This curriculum is equipment, and you can purchase a personal laptop for your student, because that makes sense. A student needs a laptop to study. I understand that. I bought a laptop for my daughter. I paid for it. You didn't pay for it. I paid for it. And she goes to the public school. So she's in public school. We're not taking advantage of the voucher, and I bought her the laptop. But this family over here is taking advantage of the $7,800 voucher and purchasing the laptop through that channel. I take issue with that. I have concern. You can buy a 55-inch TV. Is the students the only one using that TV in the home? I'm curious about that too. There's a very long list. Now, when you look at the music, you can buy musical instruments. I love the idea of buying musical instruments. I want to put a musical instrument in the hand of every student in this county, not just in the hands of the students taking the money directly out of public schools. That is where I have concern. It's not that I don't want kids that are in the private sector. I don't want to deny them access. That's not the message I'm sending. But by giving them this type of access is denying access to the rest of the kids who are remaining in public schools. That's the concern. So that's the update on vouchers. I will continue to give you an update as soon as I find out more information about the demographic. It hasn't been reported yet, but according to people at the Policy Institute, it's going to be coming soon. The last topic that I want to talk to you about today is the new middle school standard on slavery, and how slavery is to be taught to our middle schoolers in public school. Maybe you've read about it, maybe you've heard about it on the radio, maybe you're talking about it with your friends at breakfast. I love that kind of conversation, but if you haven't been exposed to the language of the standard, I'm going to read it to you today. It's just one sentence long. Standards are the law. By law, teachers must teach to the standard. It is the teacher's obligation to the state under the Professional Code of Ethics that they teach every standard in their grade level and test to 80%. 80% is mastery. So we're not getting around the standard if you're a middle school social studies teacher. By law, you're required to teach this standard. AA.2.3 in the Florida statute. Examine the various duties and trades performed by slaves. For example, agricultural work, painting, carpentry, tailoring, domestic service, blacksmithing, and transportation. With clarification, calling instruction to include how slaves developed skills which, in some instances, could be applied for their personal benefit. That's how we want to teach slavery in the state. How are teachers going to teach the standard? The governor came up with a solution, Prager University. PragerU is a curriculum that's been around since 2019. And usually I'm a university professor, Jill is a retired university professor. Usually we use that letter U as a representation of a university. So the name itself feels like it's an institution of higher learning, PragerU. It's just this guy, Dennis Prager, who's a conservative talk show host, who added the letter U to the end of his name. There's no association to higher education. He decided he wanted to be funded in the private sector to develop these educational videos. And there's a long library, a huge library of educational videos that are very far right, Christian conservative in their messaging. Fine, you can put anything you want on the internet, that's fine. I don't take issue with them existing on the internet. What I take issue with is our government in the state saying to all teachers that this is approved curriculum that you can choose to use in your classroom. You do not have to go through other channels of getting approval, like all of the books that Jill mentioned earlier, to teach in your classroom. The government is already approving it. So like the classical learning test that the governor has said, I will sell your test in my state, is saying to Dennis Prager, I will promote your materials in my state. There's so many different concepts covered in Prager materials. I'm going to talk about 3 today. I'm going to talk about the way feminism is handled. I'm going to talk about the way climate change is handled, and I'm going to circle right back to slavery, and I'm going to end on that note. First thing that I want to say, and I'm going to kind of come out and talk to you for a minute because this is really gets under my skin. Can you still hear me if I come out here and talk to you for this minute? Sorry, my back's to you. Oh, can you hear me, people on Zoom? Maybe someone will send me a message.
We'll adjust the camera.
If you can hear me.
Can you take the mic?
Should I take the mic with me?
Yeah.
I'm only going to stay on here for a minute. But I got to bring something to y'all's attention. Our current governor, I know you've had to hear him say, the state of Florida is about education, not indoctrination, right? This is what he says. It's not, we are going to take the left-wing woke ideology out of education. How many times have you heard him say this? Every day? Yeah. Every day. He says this. I have to understand why now. Why this governor has decided that the curriculum in K-12 education is steeped in left-wing liberal ideology. Why now, why today? Because here's a little history lesson. This is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. This is a DeSantis issue. This is a problem he has created to try and solve. Because the problem has not existed. We can't say that this is a partisan issue. It is not a partisan issue. How do I know this as fact? For 25 years, the state of Florida has had a Republican governor. For 25 years, the Republican governor has been in charge of the school curriculum. That is our job through the national The federal constitution, the US Constitution gives states power over public education. It is the governor's job. Every year we have a governor, we have a new set of standards. We had the Florida state standards. Remember way back on the assessment test, we had the FCAT. The FCAT turned into the FSA. The FSA is now the FAST test. We've had 4 governors that are all Republican, all encouraging the standards, but it's this governor today now who's deciding that it's a left-wing liberal ideology. I have to argue against that. It can't possibly be a partisan issue. I argue that it's a DeSantis issue. So let me move into how he's going to teach this new standard. How is he going to teach this new standard? Before we get into slavery, though, I have to say something about feminism and I have to say something about climate change just for a second. I have to read you a quote directly from one of the PragerU videos. Ooh, this one is hot, especially in a room full of women. This one is hot. The concept of feminism is represented in one of these videos. The quote from the video is, feminism is a mean-spirited, small-minded, and oppressive philosophy. I'm just gonna let that sit with you for a moment, okay? That's all I'm gonna say about feminism. I think that you can see a bigger picture there, that is the messaging that they want to send to middle schoolers with this content. Alarm, alarm, red flag, red flag. Very similar with climate change. There's a lot of climate denialism in these videos, and again, I want to follow the money. So I had to go look for the money. How are these videos? Because these are pretty well-developed videos. They're very cartoony, and they feature middle school age children trying to figure out the problems of the world, and they time travel. They go back in time and they meet Christopher Columbus and they meet Frederick Douglass. So with climate change, I wanted to know, how do you make such a well-developed video? It takes a lot of money. How did it get funded? Major financial backers are Dan and Ferris Wilkes, who are billionaires in the fracking industry. So this is a major backer of PragerU, and now we're talking about climate denialism. So you can connect the dots between fracking and greenhouse gases and carbon emissions. So what kind of messaging do they want sent there? When I think our middle schoolers need to be talking about recycling and repurposing and reusing and redesigning and clean energy, you're not going to see any of that in the PragerU videos. The last one is the most important one. It really speaks, not the most important one, they're all so important, but the one that's talking directly towards this new standard about slavery that just is heart-wrenching to me, and we have to fight against it, we have to create change, and we must remain vigilant that this is not acceptable teaching in our state to our students. So these children go back in time and they meet Christopher Columbus. And here's Christopher Columbus in this video, and Christopher Columbus says, oh, slavery's always been around. Every single country in the world has used slaves to develop its country. That may be true. Does it mean it's good? Are we okay with that? But this is what they have, as if we have Christopher Columbus's quote. But this is what they have Christopher Columbus saying in the video. I'm going to read to you again. This is what they have Christopher Columbus saying. Being taken as a slave is better than being killed. No? I don't have a problem with it. That is the message that Christopher Columbus, one of, however you feel about Christopher Columbus, that he is well studied in our curriculum, that is the message that they have coming out in the PragerU video. Another video, specifically about slavery, they go back and talk to Frederick Douglass. Abolitionist, Frederick Douglass. For those of you who don't remember from social studies, Frederick Douglass is he's a son of a slave and a landowner. And he works his way through the Underground Railroad and becomes a free slave in the North and an abolitionist, and is a preliminary figure in working with Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War and designing the Emancipation Proclamation. Very important figure in American history. So these kids in this PragerU video go back in time and talk to Frederick Douglass. I'm sitting at the edge of my seat. I can't wait to hear what Frederick Douglass has to say. This is what PragerU has Frederick Douglass saying. While slavery is wrong and evil, it was the compromise the founding fathers had to make to achieve something good. So they have Frederick Douglass selling slavery as a compromise. This is how they're going to teach the standard. This is the curriculum that they're making accessible to teach the standard. I have one more thought I'm going to share with you, and then I'm going to close my marks. I'm just here to get you a little riled up today. To become more active, to go get your friends to become more active and vote, 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 vote. This is the last one. It's about slave songs. So the kids go back in time, and there's some talk about how slaves would sing. It says, this is the quote from the video, slaves sang to rejoice while working in the fields, exhibiting happiness. I said, oh, no, because I've read the narrative of Frederick Douglass, a book I'm sure is going to be banned. I've read the narrative of Frederick Douglass. I've read it often to know that he says something in his book about the slave song. So I went digging for it. Oh my goodness, a primary source document. Can we use those in school? Directly, it's written by himself. It says written by himself. There's no more primary source document than this, right? So let's see what Frederick Douglass actually has to say about the slave song. I'm going to read you his quote. His narrative was published in 1845, 20 years before the Civil War. The life of a slave. This is what he has to really say from his own words in 1845 about the slave song. I have often been utterly astonished since I came to the North to find persons who could speak of the singing among slaves as evidence of their contentment and happiness. It is impossible to conceive of a greater mistake. Slaves sing most when they are most unhappy. The song of the slave represents the sorrows of his heart, and he is relieved by them only as an aching heart is relieved by tears. Brings tears to my eyes. I wanted to bring those issues to you. I wanted to talk a little bit about the classical learning test. I wanted to give you an update on school vouchers, but I really want to bring your attention to PragerU. Open up your ears, start reading the paper a little bit more when it's talking about PragerU or listening to that news report, and vote. Vote, 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 vote for change. Thank you for your time today.